Hey everybody, it's Rabbit. Welcome to the channel. And today we're going to be filling out this little favorite tank bingo card, I guess you could call it, and just going through which tanks I think are the best for certain categories, which tanks I like, which tanks I don't like, and all that good stuff. So just try to have a little bit of fun and see how it goes. And kicking us right off, we have the best tank in the game, and this was kind of a hard one because best tank is of course always relative to what it fights, right? So like, even if you have really good stats, if you fight other things that also have really good stats, doesn't really give you that much of an advantage. For this category, I went with kind of an odd pick. I think it's the M8 LAC, aka the Greyhound. The big thing about the Greyhound is that it's fast, it has a low profile, the 37mm is really effective, and honestly the 50 cal is also really effective. The 50 cal will absolutely shred a lot of ground vehicles and basically every air vehicle pretty easily too. And the 50 cal is also kind of semi-stabilized because it's a pentel mount. This thing really just has everything going for it, and the only real problem is that it's kind of a 1.0 vehicle, so it's kind of difficult to play it without feeling like you're seal clubbing. I went with the American one, although the Chinese one is exactly the same vehicle, it's just it doesn't have as good of a lineup around it. Chinese 1.0 to 1.3 is kind of dodgy. But you could just go to China, check this thing out for yourself. I honestly think it's pretty busted, and it's really weird that it just constantly stays at 1.0. Next up, we have the best flanker category, and here I went with the obvious pick, the AFT-09. In terms of a good flanker, the AFT-09 is just insanely fast. You have 4 ready-to-fire missiles, so once you get into position, you can start ripping them right away. The missiles can kill anything in the game from any angle. You have thermal imaging. The turret has good depression on it. The turret's also hard to kill the vehicle through it. Like, it doesn't happen that often. Like, I just feel like if you want to get to a spot quickly and you want to start farming the enemy for kills, the AFT-09 is probably the best way to do it. In fact, when I was doing the Chinese helicopter video, the way I would get into Chinese helicopters really quickly to get a video for them was just to take the AFT-09 out, up to and including at 11-0 matches at the time. It did perfectly fine. So yeah, I think you really can't beat this in terms of flanker, even at its battle rating of 8.7. And it's probably a little under-tiered, but yeah, that's another discussion. Next up is favorite nation, and I gotta pick USA here, and this has more to do with the gun handling than anything else. USA doesn't generally have the best armor or the best mobility, but they are kind of like great at the gun handling category. Like a lot of their tanks have stabilizers. They have a much higher proportion of stabilizers than any other nation. They also tend to have good turret traverses. They also tend to have good elevation and depression. So I have a lot less issues playing USA just trying to get your gun on target than I do with some other nations. And at the end of the day, if you can't get your gun on target, you can't get kills. So also USA just has really good CAS options too at multiple battle ratings, so that helps. But yeah, I would definitely go with USA here. Oh, for the guilty pleasure, I gotta go with the Zoklum Togger. Zoklum Togger is not particularly good, but the kills you get with it can be pretty satisfying, and honestly, you don't really care if you die either. So it's just one of those like fun tanks to like screw around with. It's not the most effective in the world, but I actually do kind of enjoy it. Like, I feel like people should at least give it a chance to be interesting, but it has no real prospects of being good, right? Like, even if you get a good position, you only have 6 missiles, so it is what it is, but I actually kind of enjoy it. Oh man, this is the starter of the hot ones, the one you hate and everyone else loves. Originally I was going to do the M22 Locust for this, but after going back and replaying it, I don't hate the M22. Like, I really dislike a lot of the memes around it at this point because they've gotten pretty stale, but like, I actually kind of like the tank. It's pretty effective. And then going back, I was like, oh, I've got it. It's the T-34-85. I do not like these things. The biggest thing with the T-34 like family of tanks is like their hallmark is mobility and armor. At like 3.7, 4.0, you can really count on the armor, and you can use that with the mobility to make it difficult for enemies to pick out weak points. They're pretty effective tanks, and their guns are good enough. But when you put them up to like 5.3 to 5.7, and like you give them a gun that's just kind of adequate for that battle rating, you don't really have any meaningful advantages against most enemies you fight. Like, I really can't stand playing them. I don't see any real need to play them. Yeah, I don't like them. Next up, we have the tank I love, everyone else hates. Alright. Stick with me here. I think the M8 HMC is good. I may be crazy, but like, okay, it's fast. The main gun can deal with anything. You have a 50 cal on a pintle mount. Like, your armor isn't completely unusable. Like, I think the M8 HMC is actually pretty legit. I think it's got some legs. And I know a lot of people don't like it because it's a really slow turret traverse, the gun has a poor arc, but like, I actually think it's a very usable vehicle, especially at 1.3 where like the standards of performance aren't that high. Next up, we have the Ugly Duckling, and for me, like, when you say Ugly Duckling, well, you know, the Ugly Duckling ended up being a beautiful swan, right? Like, so it looks ugly as crap, but it's actually pretty functional. And this is definitely the Sarks. I absolutely hate them. They're so forward heavy and top heavy. Like, I call them the bobbleheads because they look incredibly stupid. Like, they are mind-blowingly dumb looking, but like, they're fast. They have a good stabilized gun with the 6-pounder or the 2-pounder, depending on the version. And they have the 50 cal. Like, the Sarks work, but god, they look ugly as shit. Next up, we have the Fun Machine, just tearing it up on the battlefield. This one I gotta go with the AGS. The AGS is like one of a series of American like auto-loaded light tank event vehicles around this battle rating. But even at 10.3, this thing really manages to excel. 5-second reload. Your shell isn't the best, but it definitely works. Very low profile, very fast. Almost impossible to kill the stupid thing through the turret. It's really just an obnoxious little vehicle, and I absolutely love it. For the sniper category, there's really only one pick. I do have a video on this channel that's like the longest kill shot in War Thunder or something to that effect. Link it in the description. And of course, the vehicle I get it with is the Chinese PTZ-89. PTZ-89 has one of the highest muzzle velocities in the game. It's like 1750 meters per second or something crazy. Has a 5-second reload, has a laser rangefinder, has a stabilizer. If you just need to knock somebody's block off from like a mile away, this thing is absolutely amazing for it. I think it's a super underrated tank. I definitely would recommend giving it a shot. But yeah, if you need to land a 3.27 kilometer kill shot, this is definitely the tank I would pick. Next up, we have the Dream Tank in real life. And for this one, I would actually go with something a little more modest. I would go with the Greyhound. Just because the Greyhound, it's a fairly small vehicle, you know, I've seen it in person. Looks like you could make it street legal pretty easily, drive it around town. And at the end of the day, if you're going to have something like this, you know, what's the point if you can't show it off a little? You know, maybe throw in like a demilitarized 37mm. Like, I think you could have a lot of fun with like a real-life Greyhound, and it wouldn't be that expensive to maintain and operate compared to something like the heavier tracked vehicles you could pick here. So, yeah, I think that'd be a good pick. Most underrated. Oh, this is a tough category because, like, underrated is something where it's like people don't realize how good it is, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's amazing. And for a lot of the big three, like Germany, Russia, and USA, you're not going to find a lot of underrated tanks. Everything that's even remotely usable is probably going to have a fan club. So you kind of have to look at like some of the minor nations. My pick is going to be a little out of left field. I think the ZTZ-88A might be the most underrated tank in the game. It looks like a T-55 at first glance, but it actually has an elongated hull to accommodate a better engine, and the engine's actually pretty good. The upgraded hull armor is fairly good. It has a 105 with a really good sabot. It also has a proximity fuse round for killing helicopters with a stabilizer and a laser rangefinder. I think this thing is really good. It impressed me when I was spading it. I think you should give it a shot if you haven't. Most overrated. Oh, time to start the heat. I'm going to go with the HSTVL. I know the HSTVL is a darling of a lot of people, and honestly, if Gaijin ever fixed the vehicle, it might be a darling of me too. The problem is that the accuracy is incredibly poor. You're entirely reliant on RNG. The damage is incredibly poor. Again, you're entirely reliant on RNG. And this is one of those vehicles you can just put yourself in an amazing position and fire 3 shots, do literally nothing, and die. And that's happened to me so many times, and I can't bring myself to give this the same super high rating that a lot of people pick, because like, yeah, I've had those like bonanza games where you just go off, but I've had so many other games where you're like, shoot the barrel of a T-80 BBM 3 times and nothing happens and it just kills you. So yeah, and based on the performance of my teammates in HSTVLs, most of which seem to do very little, if anything, I really have to say this is probably an overrated tank. It's decent enough, but I think people do hype it up a little too much. Next up is our top tier pick. This is actually pretty easy for me. It's the Merkava 4M. I talked about the Merkava 4M in my video on it. It is probably one of my favorite top tier tanks right now, pretty easily. And a lot of that just comes down to most top tier tanks perform very similarly, right? Like, they're not like, none of them are just incredibly slow. None of them just have unusably bad guns. None of them have like completely unworkable armor. So you end up with like a category where you're not really selecting it based on hard stats, but rather soft stats. Like what like minor conveniences do you like? And for the Merkava 4M, I really like the trophy system. I really like the laser warning system, and I really like the fact that the tank is ambidirectional, so you can just reverse and shoot over your engine deck. Like, I feel like it gives the vehicle more versatility than a lot of the other options at top tier, and it also doesn't die to helicopters as often, which is great, because I hate dying to helicopters. Next up, we have the personal favorite, or the no-brainer. I'm going to go with the 1128, the Striker. And part of the reason, like, I have some nostalgia for a lot of the US top tier vehicles, because I worked alongside a lot of them. But, like, the reason the M1128 stands out is because not only do I, have some familiarity with the vehicle IRL, but I also just like the way it plays in game. Ever since they added the ability to remove the slat armor and improve the wheeled vehicle traction, it moves around the battlefield incredibly quickly. The gun with the M900 shell, incredibly effective. Low profile turret, like, I just find the Striker to be incredibly effective. I have a Talisman on mine, I love playing it. It's not my best vehicle, but it is my favorite vehicle. My best vehicle is actually the Merkava 3B, I believe, which is a weird pick, but I actually prefer playing the M1128. And for the last category, we have the not usually my thing, and throughout this video you can probably see I do tend to like lighter vehicles, but sometimes I do like playing a big chunker, and this is the T14. The T14 assault tank is just like a fat Sherman. It has the same gun as a Sherman, but it has like better armor. It's not quite as well armored as a Jumbo, but the Jumbo just gotten up-tiered so much that its armor doesn't feel anywhere near as effective as it used to be. Whereas the T14 still kind of feels like a Jumbo at the BR where I think the Jumbo used to be at. So yeah, the T14 has a lot of the things I like about the Sherman, but with, workable armor. So even though I'm not usually a fan of these kind of chunky or heavy tanks, I actually do kind of like the T14, and it looks cool, so that doesn't hurt. And that's a video. Tell me if you agree or disagree, or give me some of your picks. Hope you enjoyed it, hope you had fun, and please like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Have a nice day, everybody.